Jalen Hurts outdueled Patrick Mahomes and took home Super Bowl MVP, but should he be the top quarterback selected in fantasy drafts next year? We dig into the fantasy fallout following Super Bowl 59 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with the NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. No, I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting and the Super Bowl for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. We have officially ended the 2024 season. It went out with a bang with the Eagles just beating up on the Chiefs. You did say if a blowout was going to happen, you saw it going this way, the Eagles blowing out the Chiefs, and that is exactly what happened. Patrick Mahomes and this offense could not get going until garbage time, but Jalen Hurts, man, and this offense was clicking, besides Saquon Barkley struggling, but we'll get to him a little bit. But let's start here with Jalen Hurts because he's had great fantasy performances. Another great performance last night for fantasy with 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, 72 rushing yards. He led the team in rushing yards. Should he be the quarterback one off the board next season with how consistent he's been year after year after year?
Well, I think one thing that's going to help him, Michelle, is the fact that it looks like Kellen Moore, barring all surprises here, is going to be gone, even though Nick Sirianni wants him to come back and run it back with the Eagles. But Kellen Moore has to take this opportunity. I know the Saints are not an ideal job, but you're a young dude. You're going to get another chance. And if it doesn't work out, you can move on. But you've got to take it. I mean, Nick Sirianni took it. Look where he is, right? He was a young guy as well. Now he's got the best winning percentage in the NFL as a young coach. So, again, this means they're going to have yet another offense coordinator. If you keep track, went from Shane Steichen to Brian Johnson to Kellen Moore to TBD. I think they're probably going to stay in the house here. Everyone is thinking about Bobby Slowick. Would they go somewhere outside here to bring in maybe someone from the Ravens staff? All these things have been rumored, right? But I think they want to kind of control things, right? Nick Sirianni's kind of got it where he wants. He's an offensive-minded guy. So I think what they're going to do is realize, look, we want to keep opening it up for Jalen Hurts and throw downfield. I think we got a little too conservative at times this season, and I don't think they can afford to be. We'll talk about that a little later when we're breaking down Saquon Barkley. But to me, he's the safest dude, Michelle. Like, I had him on my teams the last couple of years. Like, there's just less volatility. Like, I know he's going to get his numbers. Look, we're basically comparing him versus Josh Allen. And Josh Allen's great, but there's some clunker games that Josh Allen can put up from time to time. And what did we have also? We had Hurts was still getting all the touchdowns, right? Saquon Barkley was doing really well, but Hurts still got the big touchdowns where he had James Cook score 16 times. And at some point, these Josh Allen TDs are going to dry up, where I don't think Jalen Hurts and that tush-push and the short yardage, that's going to go away. That's a staple of the Eagles' offense. I also think he's just a better, more dynamic runner. I think he just runs forward and straight a little bit. That's great. I think he kind of blends what Lamar Jackson does and what Cam Newton used to do, right? A little bit of just straight ahead power. There's a reason he's the first quarterback. Again, this is technically the first non-pocket quarterback to win the Super Bowl in terms of putting up 50 rushing yards plus and 250 passing in the Super Bowl. So, look, I think this guy has a massive ceiling. We've seen he can be at an MVP level and put up those type of numbers just a couple years ago. I think they dropped off a little bit because they got a little too run heavy, right? Like 2,000 yards from your back is going to always hurt your quarterback's production in some form. So I think Jalen Hurts, look, the defense has gotten better. That's going to, of course, limit Hurts throwing a lot of games. But again, you get this 3 TD combo here, 220 and 73 rushing yards in a game, right? I mean, this is what he can do at his best. Like when they just let him loose and let him take over, this is what he can do as a dual threat. So I'd feel the most comfortable with him over Allen because I think he's going to be very consistent with his floor, but also give you that very high ceiling.
Yeah, he does just offer such consistency. Now, so does Josh Allen, but like you said, from week to week, it feels like Hurts is much more consistent. And also, like, he was the quarterback 5 this year in points per game. I mean, right there with Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield by like 0.5 points
Yeah.
per game,
And this
right?
is a bad
And,
year.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. He only threw 18 touchdowns, and he's still putting up 21 fantasy points per game. Over the last 3 seasons, it's Josh Allen at 23 points per game and Jalen Hurts at 22. Lamar just under him at 22.1. But yeah, Jalen Hurts, I will be absolutely fine if people are taking him as the first quarterback off the board next year. It's just safe. And then with his 2 wide receivers, it was a passing game yesterday, but with how early they went up, it was kind of like they didn't really need them all that much, right? Devonta Smith got his long touchdown. That's great. AJ Brown got his touchdown, but the receiving yards weren't necessarily there because they just didn't have to throw too much in the second half. What are we thinking about these two moving forward? Because we saw Devonta Smith go down from the wide receiver 16 to wide receiver 21 from 2023 to 2024. We saw AJ Brown fall from wide receiver 7, but still finish as the wide receiver 11 in 2024. The thing with both of them is, will the targets be there next year without Kellen Moore there, right? Does it go back to more pass heavy? Saquon Barkley, can he handle the workload? Because if Saquon's going to get his 300 plus carries again, it's going to be another year of, an up and down for both Smith and AJ Brown.
Yeah, that pretty much looks like that. Those numbers, Michelle, are tied to just not passing as much, right? I mean, they're not that big of a drop off when you look at it. Wide receiver 16 to 21, you're still in either case a wide receiver 2 for Devonta Smith, and that's what we see him in fantasy because he's a little bit big play dependent, can disappear in some games, a little bit boom or bust, right? AJ Brown is supposed to be the quote steady guy, even when he's double teamed, and then he makes up for some of those clunkers with some massive, like 2 touchdown games, right? So he's got maybe the higher ceiling and a higher floor at that position. And you look at him, I mean, yeah, that's what's going to happen. I mean, wide receiver 7 down to 11. And this was supposed to be a year where he was complaining, he was hurt, not getting the ball enough here, and he's still in the top 12. Like, he's still a solid wide receiver 1. So let's just say you can go into the season like you're going to be very confident that both of these guys are going to produce. And this is when you're running 55% of the time. This is their numbers, and they still don't deviate too much from where they are. So if this tips over right to the normal league thing of even if they're down to 50% passing, I think this is going to be really good here for the Eagles. And again, I think the sky's the limit with these guys. And the thing about it is they don't really force too many guys. I know Jahan Dotson made a play, but Dallas Goedert, we'll talk about him, nowhere to be seen, even though this was a great matchup for the tight end. They didn't really need him. That came into play here. But this passing game still pretty much goes through 2 guys, all throughout the field. There's sometimes a little bit of Dotson. He's annoying. Get him out of here. I don't want to see him catching long balls anywhere. I'm glad at least Hurts was able to run in that ball, because if Jahan Dotson had scored the first touchdown of the Super Bowl, I would have just lost it. But anyway, it's still the Brown and Smith show here with Hurts. So I feel really good about that not changing. And I love things, Michelle, as we've talked about, things in fantasy that are not variable, and these 3 guys are not very variable.
Yeah, I think AJ Brown could end up being a really good value next year because people seem to be off of him. He actually scored more fantasy points per game this year than he did in 2023. I mean, by very, very little. But in 2023, that's when he went off for 4. In 2022 and 2023, he each had 1,400 plus receiving yards in both of those, and that dropped off this year. But his yards per reception went way up, and his targets were way down. But hopefully, those will pop back up. So I feel better about AJ Brown moving forward, of course, than Devonta Smith. But Smith is who he is. He's always going to be that low end wide receiver 2, steady enough throughout the year. We are going to get into Saquon Barkley because this dude had 1 gazillion touches this year. He ended up with 436 in 20 games played, but the Chiefs did a great job stopping him last night. 25 carries for 57 yards. Definitely a disappointment for him on the ground, but how much are we trusting him next year after all of this workload? We'll get into that right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you lock out LinkedIn job clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in just one place. Here's how it works. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insight. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Again, post your job absolutely for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show. And now we're going to get to the delicate topic of Saquon Barkley. He had another 25 carries in this game, even though they didn't need to give him 25 carries. They were dominating with the passing game. They had Kenneth Gainwell. And they just were trying to keep, I think, the Chiefs' defense a little honest to set up some big plays. But the second half, they definitely scaled down and had to bring in Kenneth Gainwell to close things out here when the lead was no longer an issue. Now I go back to Terrell Davis. This is the most high-volume productive season. Well, now it is better than Terrell Davis in terms of the yardage production. But Terrell Davis had a lot of injury attrition after that big year where he went over 2,000 yards and helped them win. It started to decline in a hurry, and he was a guy with a history of injury. Saquon Barkley is a guy with a history of injury. We've seen it. I've talked about a lot on the show. Christian McCaffrey, high volume injury. Josh Jacobs didn't get hurt, but he wasn't as effective. Jonathan Taylor, drop off after leading in rushing. The only guy that kind of defies everything is Derrick Henry, right? He comes back, wins a rushing crown. He just looks physically dominant again, like something is seriously up with that dude and Adrian Peterson where they could keep doing that. But when we look at Saquon Barkley, like how confident are you that he's going to duplicate this? And we talked about Kellen Moore leaving. It's not going to be as run heavy. I think you have to expect a significant drop-off. The question is, Michelle, is it enough to take him out of RB1 overall consideration?
When you're looking at his production, like it was an amazing year. I'm not going to take anything away from him,
awesome.
but he wasn't used a lot as a receiver, and he didn't score like it wasn't like it was 20 plus touchdowns, right? So he actually scored more fantasy points in his 2018 rookie season and points per game than his 2024 season. I mean, it was very, very close. But then you look at the other great seasons of running backs. Christian McCaffrey's 2019 season, he scored over 4 more points per game than Barkley this year. Then Todd Gurley in 2018, 4 more points per game than Barkley this year. Derrick Henry's 2021 and 2022, what was it? Both better than Saquon. So I'm just saying, like, this year was great for Saquon, and it's like the best that you're ever going to see from him, right? And it still wasn't that super, super crazy elite fantasy season that we've seen from some other guys. Now, when we saw Christian McCaffrey do that in 2019, his body fell apart in 2020, right? When we saw Christian McCaffrey do it in 2023, his body fell apart this year. Todd Gurley's body fell apart after 2018. So, like you said, it's Derrick Henry and not a lot of other guys here whose body could hold up. I don't want to just say you can't take him 101 because we're scared of injuries, because the offensive line's going to be great. And if he can stay healthy, he's still going to be a beast. It's just, you just got to be a little bit worried, and you have to have a backup plan. Like Will Shipley is going to have to be drafted by you, and hopefully that's the backup, right? Who would take over that role. But you're going to need the insurance if you do go with Barkley 101.
Yeah, and it worked out for a little bit with McCaffrey, right? If you had Jordan Mason, you were okay, but then that thing also fell apart at some point. But the question is, where else would you go, right? I mean, you could think about Bijan Robinson. He could come into the chat. Like, I don't know if we would want to go in that direction. Like, you could look at Derrick Henry, but is he going to duplicate the touchdowns? That's hard to do, right? And from one season to the other. So I'm not sure that there's a better option. You can't go back to McCaffrey, certainly not, right? And maybe you go to thinking outside the box and say Jonathan Taylor will bounce back, but you can't go there either. So I think it is default Barkley. It's just going to be maybe not close to those big numbers. Like I would say the drop off, it's fair to say it'll go to 1,500, but we're okay It goes to 1,500 if he can compensate with the touchdowns. But as Michelle mentioned, he wasn't scoring a lot because Jalen Hurts got most of the goal line opportunities. And he wasn't being thrown to. They don't really work that in, but maybe a new coordinator would do that. Now, if they go in-house, they would look at this guy, Brian Patullo, who is the passing game coordinator. So that might help him kind of just say Saquon has to be involved. Look, he was involved in the Super Bowl, right? They weren't running him all that well, so they gave him 5 catches. Like, if he can get like 5 catches per game, we want him to get more than 30 yards, but like you want him to be a little bit more involved in the passing game. That's what he was doing, right? When he was a rookie Giant, he was everything to them. He was everything the Giants were. The Eagles, he's a luxury complimentary piece. He's an all-time luxury complimentary piece, but he's really just needed as a runner on this team. So again, I still think he's the best choice. I just don't think you can expect him to maybe carry your team like you think he's going to if you take him at that spot.
Yeah, I don't think I want the 101 this year is what I think comes down to.
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Unless maybe you want to go Jamar Chase or go the wide receiver route.
That's not bad. Or Hurts.
It's just going to be real scary to take Saquon. But at the same time, like you said, who else are you going to take? Bijan Robinson would be a great pick too, but like you're just hoping he can be a Saquon Barkley, and we haven't quite seen him get to that production even close to yet. So that will be hard to do. We will be discussing the 101 much more throughout the summer. Now with Dallas Goedert, put up a big dud in a great matchup. We were excited for him after his big game in the conference championship. Only 2 receptions, 27 yards. I guess this is what Dallas Goedert does, right? He has some big games. You see his talent, and then he's not used anymore. It's just so inconsistent with his usage throughout his entire career. But I mean, this is pretty much what he is, right? He's never had a season with more than 9.5 fantasy points per game. That was in 2022. 2023 was 7.6. This past year, 8.3. He has a lot of injury histories where it feels like he always misses a few games each season. He never catches touchdowns. I mean, 3-3-2, 2 touchdowns this year. So I don't, we talked about maybe he's an option for next year as a late round tight end pick, but at the same time, what are you going to get from him, right? It's too inconsistent. I kind of more leaning towards just stay away from him. I doubt he's going to have would it be 8th year breakout.
Yeah, he's not a guy that you get excited about. Okay, I'm putting in a tight end. Like, you're just filling that spot. And you should not have anybody in any position where you say, I'm just filling the spot with this dude who I think could have a good game. Well, he's Dallas Goedert, right? He's got to catch some passes with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. He's playing the Eagles offense. He's not bad, right? So they actually could move on from him and get creative this year. He's got only 1 more year left on his contract. He is getting older as well. So injury attrition, getting older, doesn't have a consistent role on this offense unless you have like an A.J. Brown out or Devonta Smith not playing, right? Then he suddenly sees an expanded role, but you can't count on that in any given week for production. So Dallas Goedert, I think I'm off of. I think his days as fantasy asset may be over. Maybe if he goes to another team where he has a chance to be successful, I think that might be the best way for Dallas Goedert to retain fantasy football value.
And possibly, hear me out, Vinnie. What if he is Travis Kelce's replacement? What if the Eagles were to send him to the Chiefs? I mean, Dallas Goedert with Patrick Mahomes in that offense, I actually would be pretty excited about. And Travis Kelce, we saw him have another bad game. Was that the last time we'll ever see him on an NFL field? We'll discuss right after a quick break. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into the same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. The biggest question leaving us behind after the 2024 season with the Kansas City Chiefs is Travis Kelce going to retire, right? Because it was a down year for him, not only in fantasy, it was his career low fantasy points per game, not counting his rookie season. He played one game. Career low receiving yards per game, career low yards per reception, career low 3 receiving touchdowns. And then he had another bad game in the Super Bowl, right? He only ends up with 39 receiving yards on 4 receptions, dropped the first 2 targets he had. And he's going to be 36 years old next year. So do you think Travis Kelce will be back? And how much of that would impact Mahomes if he's not?
Yeah, this is a very tough call for me because Travis Kelce didn't really want to talk about it after the game. It was a very brief press conference. He just looked totally dejected. He was walking by himself. There was like a lot of video about that. And then Patrick Mahomes had to kind of answer for him and says, well, Travis will take his time and decide what he's going to do. That's the usual canned answer, right? I mean, he'll take his time, evaluate everything in the offseason and decide. Now, the question is, what is he evaluating, right? Is he going to evaluate, did I play poorly? Can I get back up to that level? And can I help this team win another Super Bowl? Because that would be the only reason you want to come back, right? If you're Travis Kelce, is that you feel like you need to redeem yourself, that you still have something great left. You want to end on a high note here, win the Super Bowl, and also personally play a lot better in that opportunity and not walk off with this. The other way you can look at it is like, maybe I just don't have it anymore. I need to move on. There's some other things in my life that I'll be fine, right? With everything else going on, I've got the multimedia, the other things going on here. So like he could just walk away and decide, look, I've done enough. I've given enough. And I'm okay with it. Look, my brother's fine. Like he walked away. He didn't get that ring with the Eagles, that second ring, but he was still okay with one ring and is doing his thing. So all these things are going to weigh. He's a unique individual. I think he can do a lot. He's very talented. We know that. So if he steps away from the game, he won't be bored and he'll have something to do. So I think it's a 50-50 shot here, Michelle, that he could be out. And then the Chiefs, they'd have to maybe go after Dallas Goedert in a trade or something like that. I don't think they would just elevate Noah Gray. I don't think he's good enough to be out there every time. This class of tight ends is starting to look really good across the board, where you might have 2 first-rounders and have at least 5 guys taking the first couple days, right? So I think it all might be lining up towards the Chiefs needing to replace him. But again, I don't know what that would do here going forward. I think what we could see is a pivot to finally the Chiefs joining most teams in the league and making the wide receivers the centerpiece.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if he actually goes because Mahomes has started just one game. Oh, well, so he's technically started 2 games without both Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. That's it in his career. 2 games without both of them. One of them was his very first start in the NFL. It was week 17, 2017, when the starters were resting for the playoffs with Alex Smith still there. The only game that Travis Kelce has missed over the last 3 seasons was week 1, 2023 against the Lions. That's games that Patrick Mahomes also started. They lost that game. Mahomes certainly didn't have a great game, averaged 5.8 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So we have a very, very small sample size without Travis Kelce, especially without Kelce and Tyreek Hill. So it's going to be interesting to trust Mahomes next year because he's been so disappointing, I guess, in fantasy lately, especially with how good his defense has been. And then it's not only Kelce may retire, but DeAndre Hopkins is a free agent. Hollywood Brown's a free agent. Juju's a free agent. Rashee Rice, we'll see how healthy he could be next year and what happens with him off the field and his legal issues. And then you have Xavier Worthy, who, has broken out at the end of this year. So could this be an offense finally where we see a top wide receiver again? Maybe it can Worthy be a 150 target guy?
Well, he would look great in the Super Bowl. I know a lot of it came in the garbage time, but they made it almost look easy when they were coming back. And maybe they just realized, look, the Eagles are not worrying about their coverage as much, and we're getting balls downfield. But catching all 8 targets in the Super Bowl is no joke as a rookie, right? He still made the plays in that game, and he scored twice. And Michelle, remember that thing that I was looking at there, the combined 200 yards, that prop that was there for Worthy and Travis Kelce? Guess who let down? It was Kelce. He was like 4 yards short of 200 combined yards. And I was like, oh, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Kelce needs to make one more play. Worthy needs to make one more play. But Worthy was carrying all the weight in this one. So I said, this kid is legit. His speed is really hard to stop for many teams. So I'm hoping he's going to be their new Tyreek Hill. Now will they need to find a new Travis Kelce? We have to wait to be seen. But if they have Rushy, Rice, and Worthy, I'm going to feel a lot better if Rice comes back and doesn't have suspension and goes in that direction. That'll be really special here potentially for Mahomes. But they do have to figure this out, or this passing game is going to go through some of its old emotions here.
Yeah, I really liked Worthy in Texas. I'm happy to see him starting to break out. It was a slow start to his rookie season, and that's okay. I mean, but since week 15, it's been 17 fantasy points, 17, 19, a down week in the divisional round, and then 19 points in the conference championship and 32 points in the Super Bowl. So it was a long stretch here to finish off his rookie season of really good games, a lot of touchdown scoring. Great to see. He's definitely going to go pretty high, I feel like, in drafts next year. So we'll see if I'm willing to pay that price. We'll see who they add here in the offseason. And that's kind of make our decision about Patrick Mahomes, right? What pieces do they lose on defense? Could they be a little bit worse? Because when we saw the Chiefs allowing points, then Patrick Mahomes was able to put up points on his own, right? And even in yesterday's game during the Super Bowl, at least there was garbage time for him to come back, and he actually ended up having a pretty solid fantasy day. But when the Chiefs are defense is balling out, they don't ask Patrick Mahomes too much. And there was a lot of games this year with 15 points or under. So they're going to need to stack up this offense again for him for me to feel good about drafting him. And I don't know if it's just Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice and no Kelce and no anybody else, how good I'll feel about that.
Yeah, you also need that receiving and running presence back in the backfield, right? I mean, Kareem Hunt was a makeshift solution with Isaiah Pacheco not looking great from the fibula injury. But Pacheco also didn't come back strong. They need to reevaluate that. Pacheco, we know, has been limited as a receiver for the most part. I mean, given one of their best performances was with Damian Williams in the Super Bowl in the backfield. They need that versatile back who can do a little bit of everything. So I'm the Chiefs. I have to look at Trey Smith on the offensive line. Mike Caliendo has to go on the left side. They need to look at tackle potentially here after Kingsley Sumatea was not very good. They've got to look at their entire offensive line that isn't Joe Thuney and Creed Humphrey at the left guard and center. So they got to reevaluate that so they get better run blocking, better pass protection for Mahomes to go downfield. And then I would think I want to add a special back to this mix. I think the Chiefs need to do this here. Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire didn't work out as a first rounder. I'm not saying go in the first round, but find a back that's a little bit reliable, versatile, can also be a key target for Mahomes. So they mix up this offense a little bit because I don't think Hunt is the answer here. He's also a free agent. So again, the Chiefs are rife with possibilities here. They have potential to be reborn into a better fantasy unit, but we'll just have to see how it goes because very important offseason for them going forward, starting with what Kelce does.
Absolutely. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We will be back tomorrow talking about more fantasy goodness. Talk to you then. Bye, y'all.